You are listening to part 17 of our 24-part series, Marvelous Mints, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Thank you so much, Gemini. And we might want to explain why it has suddenly become a 24-part series, since we've been saying 20 parts up until now. And that is partly because I kept just not being sure whether or not I was going to have the time to do the last four, but there's such interesting mints that I decided I'm just going to devote the time to do it. So it really is going to be 24 weeks, 6 months worth of mints. People are already, getting in touch with me and saying, I'm so fascinated by this. I hope you keep talking about mints for a long time. I'm like, yeah, well, we are coming to the end, but not for a while yet. So, what kind of mints have you been using in your life? The last time we were together, we talked about some more exotic mints, tulsi and shiso and bee balm and hyssop.
Well, we talked about holy basil at one point, and
right, tulsi.
We just bought seeds to start planting again this spring, which is coming upon us. Yes, so I'm delighted about that because it died off through the winter, as we discussed. And I just made peppermint tea for someone that had a little bit of a tummy ache today with some ginger in it. So I am using mint. Yes.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, we have been all along now talking about the mint family. The mint family used to be called the Labiatae because they have lips. In German, the Lippenblumen. Now it's called the Lamiaceae because of certain botanical rules. And we've been talking about a great many of the different genera in the Lamiaceae family. And the one genus that we have yet to talk about that we're going to jump right in on is the Mensa genus. The genus Mensa is mint. This is the mint family, and Mensa is the genus of mint. And if you say, well, what kind of mint? I have to say to you that the genus Mensa virtually defines genetic diversity. There are 25 true species of Mensa. In other words, there are 25 wild species in the genus Mensa, which includes peppermint, Mensa piperata, and spearmint, Mensa spicata. But through human interest and human hybridization, there are now more than 2,300 named varieties of mints. Do you grow mint, Gemini?
I do. I grow a lot of mints. Some of them I didn't know were mints till we started doing these series.
Right, but I'm talking about the genus Mensa.
Yes, because I grow spearmint and peppermint.
Okay, and any other mints in Mensa besides spearmint and peppermint?
Does catnip fall in there?
No, it does not. That's in the Nepeta genus, but orange mint is a Mensa, and chocolate mint is a Mensa.
I have chocolate mint, yes.
There you go. Right, and there are broadly two varieties of spearmint that are grown. There's one with a pointed, shiny leaf and one with a round, fuzzy leaf.
I have pointed, shiny.
There you go. 2,300 named varieties in the Mensa genus. And that doesn't even begin to really touch it. Because if you grow more than one kind of mint, you know that the Mensa genus loves to hybridize itself. If you grow peppermint and spearmint somewhere down the line, you're going to get some third mint growing.
Yes, I've experienced that.
Right? And you say to yourself, what's this? It's not quite peppermint and it's not quite spearmint.
Exactly.
All right. Most of the Mensa genus are perennial plants. And one of the most common of the wild ones is Mentha aquatica, which is also known as water mint. And water mint is usually characterized by the fact that it has purple stalks, and sometimes even the leaves become purple. I have a really nice patch of water mint growing out in one of my wet fields, and it gets a really pretty mauvey, purpley color. One of the ways that I was taught to see the difference between spearmint and peppermint is that spearmint has flowers like a spear out the end of the stalk. And peppermint has flowers like necklaces around the stalk at each leaf node. Have you noticed that about your peppermint and your spearmint?
I have. That's an excellent way to keep that straight in my head.
Yeah, they have very distinct patterns of flowering, and these, in fact, are the two patterns that we find in the whole mint family, in the Lamiaceae family. They're either flowering in a spike like lavender. We think of her flowering in necklaces, or some people call them bracelets, around the stalk where the leaf nodes are. Catnip flowers like that, right?
Yes.
Catnip and lemon balm, and many of the mints have that little around the stalk kinds of flowers. The other thing that I found out is that the leaves of peppermint have a stalk, and the leaves of spearmints don't. And when I read that, I thought, I wish there wasn't 2 feet of snow out there, because I want to go and look. But as I cast back in my memory, I could see the peppermints, the orange mint and the chocolate mint and the water mint and the true peppermint, and I could see the little stalks on those leaves. And then when I thought about the spearmint, the leaf just comes right from the main stalk. There isn't a little leaf stalk.
Yeah, now that you say that, that sounds familiar to me as well.
Yeah.
I hadn't paid much attention to that.
Me either. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Of all of the plants in the mint family, peppermint probably is the one that is most usually grown in a garden. If somebody says, oh, I'm growing herbs, you can almost bet that one of the herbs that they're growing is some kind of peppermint or spearmint. In addition to the Mentha spicata and the Mentha piperata and the Mentha aquatica, there is also the field mint, which is Mentha arvensis. There is the marsh mint, which is Mentha sativa. There is the curly mint, which is Mentha crispus. There is the orange mint that I mentioned, which is Mentha citrata, and something that's sometimes called tangerine mint, which is Mentha odorata. There is Egyptian mint, which is Mentha rotundifolia, sometimes also called round-leaved mint, and that's not the round-leaved spearmint we're talking about, but the round-leaved peppermint. And horse mint, which is Mentha sylvestris, and not to be confused with American horse mint, which is a monarda and not a mentha at all. So I think that the most important thing for us to remember about the mints, the peppermint and the spearmint and the orange mint and the chocolate mint, is that they are not hugely distinct from each other. Now, we've been talking about this kind of in general as we've been talking about the mint family. And I've been saying, well, you know, all of the plants in this family that have volatile oils are going to have, to more or less, some degree, very similar uses. We know that they're all going to be antispasmodic. We know they're all going to be antibacterial. We know they're all going to be helpful in the digestive system and in the pulmonary and the breathing apparatus as well. And it has been really fascinating to kind of focus down and bring our focus down into what each one of these does. But then when we come to the mints, we want to bring the focus back out again and say, here, when we're talking about peppermint or spearmint or curly mint or crisp mint or cross mint or sage mint or Mary's mint or any of all of those thousands of different mints, so long as they're in the mentha, we're pretty much going to use them the same way. So I am going to talk more about spearmint here this week, and next week I'm going to really focus much more on peppermint. But if you hear me say something about peppermint and you want to use spearmint, it would probably work. If you hear me say something about spearmint and you think, oh, but I'd rather use peppermint, it would probably work. Now, I find that many people have a very pronounced taste and smell preference when it comes to mints. And for myself, I like the very menthol-rich, minty mints. I like the chocolate mint. I like the water mint. I like the really strong peppermints. And I don't so much like the spearmints. Do you have a preference between the spearmints and the peppermints?
I prefer peppermint myself, the taste and the scent.
The taste and the smell, yeah. It's not that I would say that spearmint is nasty in any way.
No.
It's just not that attractive to me, and yet we certainly know from spearmint chewing gum that there are people who really do like that particular variety of mentha. With anything in the mentha genus, we want to collect the leaves on a really hot, really sunny day. And in this genus, the highest amount of oil is going to be present in the plant when the leaves are harvested before the plant has bloomed, but not really far before it's bloomed. In other words, usually what's said is that the plant should be in bud. So you want to actually see the first flower buds forming, but you don't want them to open, and that's when you're going to get absolutely the most taste and the most smell from anything in the mentha genus, whether it's peppermint, spearmint, or any of the other ones that we are talking about here. So I will also mention here briefly, and far more next week when we're talking about peppermint, that menthol is indeed considered the primary active ingredient in mints. And menthol, of course, is extracted. First, we could use it as peppermint essential oil, and we'll be talking about that next week. But we can even purify it more and have just menthol. You could actually go to the drugstore and buy pure menthol. It's a little bit tricky to use, but it's used in sometimes like a liniment to rub on the chest to help open up breathing and other things like that. The oils from the mints are critical in commerce. Medicines are flavored with mints, candies, liqueurs, cigarettes, and all kinds of other products. Spearmint, especially, is used to make mint jelly and mint sauce to flavor chewing gum and to flavor mint juleps and iced tea. the approximately 30,000 acres of spearmint are grown in the United States. And I was a little amazed at that. I thought that's a huge amount of spearmint. Certainly it's not, the kinds of millions of acres of lavender that are grown, but it's still, and that's just in the United States, that's still a lot of spearmint that we're growing. In Elizabethan times, more than 40 ailments were reported to have been remedied by mints. And as we're talking about this, again, let me remind you that when you look in the older herbals, they don't really make a distinction. They don't say necessarily peppermint this or spearmint that or orange mint this other thing. They just call them all mints. So just feel at ease about that. John Joslin, a 17th century visitor to New England, noted that mint was thriving, both the wild mint of the New World and the mint that had been taken from Europe there. Because of their strong smells, mints have also been scattered on the floor, both to remove foul odors from public places and feasting halls, and to rid public places and houses of the vermin that come when there are indeed foul smells. Do we still do that? Well, no, we usually don't throw herbs on the ground because there's a bad smell, although it's not too bad an idea. But we do put mint in mouthwash and toothpaste so that there's not a foul odor or vermin in our mouths. Mints to the rescue. Mints make things taste good. Mints make things smell good, too. So we are happy to have the mints. Spearmint, in addition to being called Mentha spicata, is also called Mentha viridis, which means bright green. It's also known as garden mint, mackerel mint, green mint, spearmint, fish mint, Mentha de Notre Dame, in other words, Our Lady's mint, Herba Santa Maria, and lamb mint. The smell of mint does stir up the mind and the taste to a greedy desire of meat, says Gerard. Ovid represents the hospitable Baucis and Philemon scouring their board with green mint before laying upon it the food intended for their divine guests. The ancients believed that milk would prevent the coagulation of milk, and so when they had fresh milk, they would often drop mint into it to keep it fresh. Pliny says, mint will not suffer milk to curdle in the stomach, and therefore it is put in milk that is to be drunk, lest those that drink thereof should be strangulated thereon. Many other references to mint, among them payment by the Pharisees of tithes of mint. It is mentioned in the early medieval list of plants, as well as I said, being one of the most common herb garden plants. Chaucer refers to the little path of mints full and green. And Turner states in his Herbal of 1568 that garden mint was called speary minty, the smell rejoiceth the heart of man, and for which cause strew it in your chamber and the place of recreation, where you would have pleasure and where you would repose, and where your feasts and your banquets are to be made. Parkinson, in his Garden of Pleasure, mentions divers sorts of mints, both of the garden and the wild, of the woods and mountain, of the standing pools of waters, They are used in baths with balm and other herbs to comfort and strengthen the nerves and sinews. Mints are much used, outwardly applied and inwardly drunk, to strengthen and comfort those who have a weak stomach. Just as today, ancients used mint to scent their bath water and as a restorative. In Athens, where every part of the body was perfumed with a different scent, mint was the scent for the arms. Gerard says, mint is good against watering eyes and all manner of breakings out on the head and sores on the body. Apply the mint with salt to the biting of a mad dog, and lay it on the stinging of wasps and bees, and you will have good success. Culpepper is so taken with mint that he lists more than 40 distinct maladies for which mint is singularly good. Being smelled into, it is comforting for the head and the memory, and a decoction, when used as a gargle, cures the mouth and gums of all sores. Garden mint is most useful to wash children's head when the latter are inclined to sores, and wild mint mixed with vinegar is an excellent wash to rid children's scalp of scurf. Rose leaves and mint, heated and applied outwardly, cause a deep and peaceful rest and much sleep. In Wales, it is usual to boil cabbage with mint. Mint is known to aid the digestion. It makes the crude albuminous fibers of vegetables and meats more digestible. It stimulates the entire digestive process and prevents septic changes no matter what has been eaten. Try sprigs of mint to flavor your green peas and also your new potatoes. Put it in your pea soup and use it to make mint jelly or mint vinegar or mint punch. Take a quart of fresh mint leaves. Wash them. Put them in a large jug and mash them with a wooden spoon until soft. Then cover them with freshly boiled water and infuse for about 10 minutes. Strain, cool the liquid, and set on ice until required. Now add this to 2 cups of chilled grape juice and some lemon juice to taste. Add a little sugar, if you will, and then a quart of ginger ale. Fill your glasses a third full with ice, and then your mint punch. And don't forget also mint julep and mint water. And I even found a recipe for mint cake. So if you're looking for something minty, the spearmints and the peppermints are the very thing to reach for. The green mint is merely a cultivated form of Mentha sylvestris, the horse mint. And horse mint was recorded as being cultivated at Aleppo in ancient Greece. Either Mentha sylvestris or some form like Mentha viridis, which is not known as a truly wild plant, was probably the mint of the Bible. And I was so surprised to read that spearmint is not considered truly a wild mint because it gets very wild where I live. Like, I can walk out onto, like, vacant areas, not like a meadow or a hayfield, but like areas in town, like behind the health food store where there's kind of a, it's not a trashy area, but it's where the trash accumulates there. And back in that area, there's a patch of wild spearmint. And so on, and places where I was just amazed that it's not really wild, but that it's something that kind of follows along in people's footsteps. The genus name mentha is derived from a mythological origin. Mentha was a nymph, and Pluto loved her. Proserpine, who was jealous, turned mentha into the plant that we now call mint. So it's another one of those Greek god playing around and the woman being jealous there. We find it a lot with Zeus, too, who keeps turning hapless women that he wants to be lovers with into various trees and so on. I have not found that my mint, my peppermint or spearmint, has ever been susceptible to any kind of disease. How about you, Gemini?
Well, a couple of seasons ago, we found like some white, it looked like mold on some of our peppermint leaves, but not on the spearmint. And I don't know if that's what it was, but I didn't harvest it that year once I found that.
Yeah. I noticed that the books say to watch out for rust, and that there's a kind of mint rust, which is actually more like like you're saying, it's more like a mold.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like.
Yeah, and it shows up as moldy patches. No, I've seen that on my bergamot.
Yes, I definitely had it on my bee balms.
And pretty large patches of it on the bee balm, and it can turn it white and or black.
Yes.
But I have found especially the Mentha aquaticus, the true wild mint here, and my cultivated Mentha piperotas and Mentha crispus seem pretty immune to any problems at all, so long as they are given full sun, because they don't seem to do very well in shady places.
Yeah. Part of the issue here may have been we just had such a rainy season that season, and it was so humid. In my mind, I thought that's what it might be, but I don't know.
When spearmint is grown as a medicinal herb, says Maud Greaves, it is usually grown for the sake of the oil that is extracted from it. And to do that, gather the shoots in August, just as the plant is coming into flower, and take it to the distillery as soon as possible. The British Pharmacopoeia directs that oil of spearmint must be distilled from the fresh flowering plant. Now, Maud Greaves, of course, was writing over a century ago. And nowadays, although there are still some places that do distill from the fresh plant, often the plants are dried, and then the oils are solvent extracted. It is estimated that 350 pounds of spearmint will yield 1 pound of oil. And I was quite amazed at that. That's a very high percentage of oil for spearmint to be giving. And the estimates that I had been given for how much essential oil you can actually get from lavender, the amounts were quite a bit higher in terms of the plant and quite a bit lower in terms of the amount of oil that you get. It's very important once you harvest the spearmint to harvest it in the evening so that you can get it to this distillery the next morning. Otherwise, the leaves will heat up and ferment, and your oil will not be of good quality. The chief constituent of spearmint oil is carvone, but there are also present limonene, philandrine, and esters of acetic, butyric, caproic, and caprylic acids. There are, in fact, several different essential oils known under the name of spearmint oil. In the United States, it is indeed Mentha viridis, but in Russia, it's Mentha vertellata. In Germany, Mentha longifolia. And in other places, other kinds of menthas. Oh, my goodness. We have indeed spent a wonderful time talking about mints in general and spearmint in specific. And time for us to fold our tent and say goodbye for this session, and we'll be back next week with Peppermint.
Thank you, Susan. A wonderful discussion on mints in general and spearmint. This concludes part 17 of our 24-part series, Marvelous Mints, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.